Today, we continue to talk about the 5 incredible inventions that Sumerians left us. In the last episode, we talked about the third incredible, the Tree of Life, and the 4 waves of monarchs on the Sumerian King List. So let's briefly recap. The Sumerian King List said that the first wave of 8 monarchs ruled for an average of 30,000 years each, for a total of 240,000 years. After this, there was a great flood. Then came the second and third waves of monarchs, and the duration of their reign gradually diminished over time. By the 4th wave of monarchs, it matches up with the order of the monarchs we found in history, and the time of the monarch's rule can be perfectly matched. When it comes to the Sumerian King List, many scholars have pointed out that it may be a romantic literary work that is a result of the Sumerians combining myths, legends, history, etc., and compiling them. Wasn't this kind of romance common for the prehistoric ancestors? The Sumerian King List may not be history, but just a clue. Sumerians said themselves, to understand the Sumerian King List, there are 2 key points. The first is to assume that they are not lying. The Sumerian King List is an official history, not a literary creation. We have unearthed a total of 16 copies of the Sumerian King List from different periods. And the contents are basically the same, right? This is enough to prove that the Sumerian King List is not a document that can be freely used to create in their culture. The second is to understand that their political thinking is very different from ours today and ancient times. The Sumerian King List begins with, after the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. At that time, there were no humans on Earth. The existing beings were some laborers who came from Nibiru to mine gold and could be called slave gods, as well as some management gods. They called them Anunnaki. Eridu was the residence of Enki, the leader of the Anunnaki. Eridu was the most influential city-state at that time, so other city-states should respect Eridu as a sacred city. However, the sacred city was not always in Eridu, since it moved from dynasty to dynasty. For example, the sacred city after Eridu was called Bad Tabira. The transfer of the sacred city was because although Enki was said to be the leader of Nibiru and the eldest son of Anu, he is not the direct son. When the gods of Nibiru, or the Anunnaki, came to Earth at the beginning of the business, the eldest son could inherit the throne. But once the business was stable, the legitimate son must inherit the throne. So the kingship was transferred to Anu's legitimate son, Enlil. This is much like the succession system of the emperor in ancient Chinese empires. Eridu, as a sacred city, was the Enki dynasty, which lasted a total of 18 sars. While for Earth, that's nearly 65,000 years. For the Anunnaki, it's only 18 years. These 18 years were mostly Anunnaki mining the Earth, and Enki presided over created the first humans as a slave race to mine gold. At the end of the 18-year-old Enki dynasty, 2 important things happened. The first important thing was that the Anunnaki signed an agreement, stipulating that human beings would be given wisdom and reproduction, develop second-generation humans to completely liberate the Anunnaki miners from the hard work of gold mining, and then let them return to Nibiru. However, in order to control humans, the third function, immortality, is absolutely impossible for them. Instead, they limited the lifespan of humans to 1/36th sar, which is about 100 Earth years. Should the humans get out of control, the Anunnaki must wipe them out completely. The second important thing, which we talked about in the last episode, is that Anu, the leader of Nibiru, came to Earth. He first affirmed the achievements of his eldest son, Enki, over the past 18 years, and then presided over the handover ceremony of the kingship. Enki ceded his kingship on Earth to his younger brother, Anu's legitimate son, Enlil. In order to balance the 2 brothers, the father also made their sister Ninhursag, also known as Ninmah, stay on Earth. Although Enki and Enlil are powerful, Ninhursag can truly master the core technology of medical treatment, life, etc., developing the first humans, the second humans, And mastering the birth, aging, illness, and death of humans are all core technologies mastered by Ninhursag. After that came the Enlil dynasty. The Enlil dynasty continued smoothly for 30 SARs, but 3 important things happened during that time. The first important thing was that Enki and Ninhursag got married, and she changed her name to Ninmah. The second important thing was that on Earth, the lonely Anunnaki began to marry the second-generation human women, and demigods began to appear on Earth. The third important thing is that Enki and Enlil had a tit-for-tat attitude toward humans, specifically these demigods. Enlil advocated strict enforcement of the protocol that required destruction of all humans and demigods. Enki advocated amending the agreement, acknowledging the established existence of the demigods, and making plans to completely hand over the Earth to these demigods in the future. After this 19 SARs, Enki and Enlil started a fight. In the end, Ninmah, as the decisive force between the 2 older brothers, chose to help her husband Enki. Just before the gods temporarily left the Earth, they launched a great flood to wipe out the human race. Enki leaked this secret to one of his human sons, or demigod sons, and asked him to lead mankind to build an ark and seek happiness for himself. After the great flood, the gods returned to the Earth, seeing the once prosperous land turned into a wasteland, and their hearts were full of sorrow. On the wasteland, the thirsty and hungry gods suddenly felt that they had lost human beings, and they were about to start a hard life on Earth. At this time, a group of humans came to offer sacrifices with food and wine, and Enlil could not help feeling pity when he saw this scene. The above story corresponds to the first wave of monarchs on the Sumerian King List, 67 SARs, about 240,000 Earth years. The story after this is the second wave of monarchs recorded on the Sumerian King List. The Sumerian King List states that after the Great Flood, kingship fell from heaven again, and the kingship was located in Kish. Kish was the sacred city of Ninmah. Ninmah was a kind-hearted mother, so when the kings of Ninmah began to be joined by humans, and Ninmah generously taught them how to gain eternal life, making them gods. Eventually, Sumerians visualized this method of attaining immortality as the Tree of Life. On either side of the Tree of Life are Enki and Ninmah. Enki and Ninmah recreated humanity and civilization. Kish's Ninmah dynasty corresponded to the second wave of monarchs in the Sumerian King List, with a total of 23 monarchs. During this period, people and gods lived in harmony, and the next dynasty was the Inanna dynasty of Uruk. Inanna is the granddaughter of Ninmah. Sumerians believe that Inanna is the representative god of Venus. That is to say, the Inanna of Sumerians is the same god as Aphrodite in Greek mythology and Athena plus Venus in Roman mythology. The wayward Inanna has so many stories. Sumerians, Greeks, and Romans have mountains of information about her, and we couldn't even tell them all. However, there was a king in the Inanna dynasty who helped mankind find the Tree of Life. This king is the famous Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was a watershed moment because the kings before him were all gods and the kings after him were all human. He was the only demigod king. We cannot verify all the kings of the Sumerian King List before him. For the kings of the Sumerian King List after him, the closer we get to modern times, the more we can find corresponding archaeological and historical evidence. In this way, his story is a key. Sumerians wrote his story as an epic Gilgamesh, which is also the first epic poem in human history. What happened to Gilgamesh in helping mankind find the way to immortality? Why did the gods after him completely disappear from the earth? Are the black-headed ones, Sumerians, and Anunnaki of the East the same as the Fulzi and Nuwa of ancient China? Why are there only Fulzi and Nuwa in Eastern mythology, but no other important gods, such as Enlil and Anu? Why has Western theology developed to form one god today? According to the myth of the Sumerians, who is their only true god? Let's talk more in the next episode, and thanks for listening.